Some of you may have worked with me doing innovation in a box, or actually not worked with me, just may be familiar with innovation in a box and some of the I5 materials. We're not going to do that today, just so we're clear. We're going to do an Accelerator Jam. I'm not going to say too much about myself, other than I'm a designer at Flowworks. I'm a partner at Juice Inc. My name's Rick Boersma. We are on 25 Waterloo. And this is actually the third MIC that we've attended, which I think is all three of the MICs so far. So in Barrie in 2015, I did what was very much of an innovation in a box or an I5 process session. And I think it was hour and a half, 3 hours, something like that, and kind of introduced this toolkit, which a fair number of people are now using, which is obviously nice for us. Then last year, when the session was, or when the MIC was happening in Burlington, Stephanie and Steve and the committee called us up and said, hey, are you interested in doing something in Burlington at the MIC? But we don't want innovation in a box. We don't want you to do the same thing. And so we started discussing it. And at that point, the discussion was really around trying to think about like an open space kind of conference or an unconference. And long story short, which is actually apt in this case, it didn't end up really being an unconference, but they gave me quite carte blanche. And I thought, well, I've got an hour, what can I do around open space and unconference and white space in an hour? So I drew some pictures using an iPad, and then I sent who was at MIC Burlington last year. And then I sent you guys out with a blank piece of paper, and you wrote a letter to yourself. So really, I think what I was hoping to do is give you the gift of 30 minutes uninterrupted, right? And hopefully you took that. So this year, got a call from Suzanne and from Stuart and Jenny and who else was there? Anyways, from the committee from MIC Guelph, and they said, are you interested in doing something again? And I said, yes, absolutely, as long as I don't have to do the same thing again. And so what are you guys kind of thinking about? And they said, well, we got this idea for kind of an Accelerator Jam, and I'm pretty sure, this goes back a ways, I'm pretty sure the word or the phrase World Cafe came up. And hackathon was probably thrown in there. And so I said, okay, well, let's see what we can do around that. So today, what we're really going to do is visit, or for some of you, I'm sure this is a revisiting, a methodology, or I would even say a technology for facilitating innovation conversations, which is called World Cafe. Now, I'm just going to do a real quick check. How many of you are familiar with the concept of World Cafes? Okay, a lot of hands. And keep your hands up if you've ever actually attended a World Cafe. Okay, great. So, fair number of people. So anyways, for those of you who haven't, the World Cafe assumptions are people already have within them the wisdom and creativity to confront even the most difficult challenges. So in other words, we bring the right group of people together and hold the conversation, facilitate a conversation, and good things are going to come from that. The answers we need are available to us, and we're wiser together than alone. All right? Now, and a lot of there's some great resources if you're not familiar with World Cafe. Probably the best place to go is www.theworldcafe.com. There's facilitation materials, there's templates, there's the questions you need to ask, all of that sort of stuff. So it's a great resource. So again, more detail about how a World Cafe and how we're going to run it today is essentially you're going to be working with your table team, but you're going to be working in pods or little subgroups or groups of 3 tables. And there's going to be 3 progressive rounds of conversation, each round addressing one question. At the end of each round, participants are going to be invited. You're going to be asked to move to another table. This, by the way, the wording here is literally drawn from that document that I just showed you. And then new questions discussed while linking and connecting ideas with previous conversation rounds. Right? So you're going to have 3 rounds of conversations with 3 different questions. And I'll go into more details. and materials provided to create a visual memory of the conversation. So we're going to talk about materials in a moment. Oh, and it's got to be more than an hour and a half long. Now, it came out very strongly in the information that I was reading. And so we've got an hour and a quarter. So actually, here, I'm going to be totally transparent with you guys for a minute. I'm thinking of the failure conversations that we just had, actually. And I thought I was sitting down with my partner, and when Ashley asked, "So what are you going to talk about?" And I immediately thought about the session, even though it hadn't happened yet. So this is the second time. So Suzanne sent me an email, I think about 4:15 yesterday, said last call for PowerPoints from all presenters, and I hadn't even started the PowerPoint yet. Honestly. And I emailed her back, and not that I hadn't been working on the session, but I was actually at the point where I had just had one of those kind of, oh no, half of it's oh no, half of it's an epiphany. And I'm going like, oh, I'm making this way more complicated. I need to completely do a 180 here. And that's basically what I said back to Suzanne. So apologies if that caused any kind of panic. So this is an experiment. First time I've run this session, first time I've run a World Cafe, certainly first time I've run a World Cafe in 85 minutes rather than the required 90 minutes, which really should be 3 hours or 6 hours or 9 hours, that sort of thing. So I have to just get, is it okay if this is a failure? Are you with me with that? Okay, all right, and on that note, there's gonna probably be typos in this PowerPoint. I did one test, walking around the room, the print's gonna be too small, so I apologize for all that kind of stuff. And what will almost certainly happen is there will be times where I am not clear enough in my instructions. So I'm going to encourage you just to say, not clear enough, can you give a little bit more information? And I will be totally cool with that. And I'm trusting that if it's a failure, it's gonna be a failure that is also a teachable moment. To use Ashley's commentary. Fair enough? Okay, all right. The best way for me to be vulnerable is just to say, I'm feeling vulnerable. So there we go. All righty, so we know that the theme of the conference, or the themes of the conference, is collaborate, create, and accelerate. And world cafes, hackathons, and a whole bunch of other methodologies are all designed to do that, right? So I'm sure some of you, well, all of you will know some of these different methodologies, whether it's lean startup or agile was being spoke about this morning, CPS, creative problem solving, six thinking hats, sprint, so kind of like a Google methodology for doing quick starts, design thinking, right? So I know these are all methodologies, and I would argue actually these are all methodologies, not only for innovation, but more specifically for framing conversations around innovation. So we get to the right conversations more quickly. And World Cafe is simply another methodology. It's not either or, it's always, in my parlance, it would always be an and, right? So what can I take from this that I can apply to other methodologies that I'm using? And again, the assumptions that we've got here, which I've already shared, is that essentially the wisdom that we need to solve these problems or these questions or answer these questions is in the room, right? That's going to go counter to some of the other methodologies, which says, you know, before we start into problem solving, maybe we need to talk to users. So there's some interesting tensions between different methodologies. And again, it's not either or black or white. It's kind of like, okay, what can we use from each of these approaches? So the objective today is really to experience and test one type of methodology for innovation, one type of methodology for collaboration, for creating, and for accelerating ideas, right? And with any kind of testing, generally if you're prototyping, you want to test just one assumption. So the only assumption we're really testing is whether this idea of moving between groups fairly rapidly, having different discussions, will actually lead to good outcomes. And that's what we'll test at the end of this. I want to talk about materials for a moment. There is, on almost every table, there is a rolled up canvas or a work mat. It's going to end up looking like that. And I want you to unroll that. Now, also on your table, there's going to be a tin can with some Sharpies. Those of you who have worked with me before will recognize those. Post-its. There's a hosting booklet, which we'll get to in a moment. There should be 2 tent cards. I'll talk about all this stuff as I'm introducing it. So let's start kind of with the big picture, kind of macro organization. At this point, I believe we've got 24 tables. I know there's more than that in the room, but I think we have 24 tables with people on them. And the tables are going to be, those 24 are going to be divided into 3 pods. And the pods are really determined, each pod has 3 themes, which are determined by one of your tent cards. So look at the tent cards, and you will see a picture of a horse. So which other teams have a picture of a horse, not a unicorn? Okay, so look over here. So there's 3 teams. So you guys are lined up this way. I believe for the rest of the room, it's like wham, bam, 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 and those 3, and those 3. So you're lined up that sort of way. All right, everybody good with that? All right. There's also a letter on that tent card, and it's important you know whether you're A, B, or C. So everybody take a look at your tent cards, and regardless of what animal you are, raise your hand if you're an A. All right, so all the A's, raise your hands if you're a B. All right, and a C? Okay, perfect, right? So, and the reason this is important because we want you to stay within your pod, within your animal pod, and we're going to ask you to rotate A, B to C to A to B to C, like that. Now, each team starts with a different question. So also on your table, the second tent card has a question on it. I'm not going to say, again, too much about the questions. We gathered a lot of questions, I think over 30, and then looking at what we were trying to, or what we could accomplish in the amount of time we had, we narrowed them down to 3 kind of general questions. Each pod is covering the same 3 questions. So we definitely want to have useful, interesting, worthwhile conversations today. Really what we're testing, though, is the methodology of, are the conversations better because we're using this kind of World Cafe kind of format. So the 3 questions very broadly are, how might we find alternative funding sources? How might we manage public engagement? How might we risk manage disruptive innovation? And each of the teams, so each of your table teams, are going to end up visiting you're going to start at your table and visit 2 other tables. So it's going to work like this. So about 20 minutes per table. It's actually going to be a little bit less. We'll start a little bit more on the first round and then get progressively less. So what will happen if you're in table number A, you're going to be starting with, how might we find alternative funding sources? So you're going to have a little conversation about context. What does that mean? What's the context for that? You're going to do a brainstorm about that, generate some ideas. At the end of that, you're going to hear the chime, which Jay so rudely used ahead of me. And then you're going to move on to the next table. I'm going to be very kind of linear about this. I'll just walk you through it. You're going to go, the next question will be, how might we manage public engagement? And in your third round, you're going to be talking about how might we risk manage disruptive innovation. If you're table number B, then you're going to start with question number B, and so it'll all work around that way. And then finally, at the end of this, we'll debrief, so what happened, or what happened, so what, and really now what? Is there anything that we learned today that we would use moving into the future? All right, everybody with me so far? Okay, all righty. So first thing that we need to do is we need to choose a host, all right? And so each group will need a table host who will remain at the table during the 3 conversations rounds. I'm going to essentially be doing the facilitation from up here, so I'm not actually asking you to be, like, you don't have to think I've got to really put my facilitator hat on here. The job of the host will be to welcome newcomers to the table. When they come, share the main ideas, themes, questions, ideas that emerged in the previous round, and then finally encourage guests to add ideas, link and connect ideas. So can I just maybe take like 30 seconds and just at the end of that, I'm going to ask, do we have a host at each of the tables? So what would be easiest if somebody would just say, I'm willing to volunteer for the host. Rick's taking a big risk up there, trying something he's never done before. I could be a host. I'm willing to do that. All right? Okay. Raise your hand if you are now a host. All right. Okay, the hosts put their hands down. Raise your hand if you're at a table without a host. All right, we're good? Every team, okay. So I'm going to assume that we're good there. Thank you for that. Actually, give the hosts a hand, just for, yeah, there we go. Great. Okay, so round one is we're going to start off by, I simply want you to read the innovation challenge that's on your table. So it's framed here as a how might we. So it's on that tent card. There's two sides to it. If you want, you can rip it in half and hand to the two sides of the room, or maybe read it out loud even. And I'll give you a minute just to read through that, and then I'll give you some more instructions. So I'm going to have you talk about it now. You're not going to go into brainstorming. Those of you who know me know that, like, I'm very unstructured, and somehow in my work that makes me really structured. And so the whole I-5 approach and whatnot is a very structured approach. So I'm trying really hard not to be too structured, not to be the benevolent dictatorial facilitator up here. All right? But I do want you, rather than go straight into brainstorm, I want you just to set a little context. So, so I'm going to give you 6 minutes for a conversation. I'm actually going to give you 5 minutes. And it's using your innovation challenge as a catalyst, I want you to take 6 minutes to answer not the question that's on that tent card, but these two questions. Why is it important that we answer this question? So in other words, if you're in table number or group A, why is it important that we even look into alternative funding sources? If you're in group C, why is it important that we manage and understand disruptive innovation better? Right? If you're in group B, I forget what the question is. But why is that question important? Why is it important that we even start to brainstorm about this? Everybody follow that? So you're not brainstorming, you're just having that conversation. You don't have to capture anything, except I would say for the host, you might want to capture some of the responses. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. If you get through the first question, why is it important, and you still have some time, then you can jump to the next question. So what's stopping us? What obstacles might stop us from finding or implementing solutions to this? Could be funding, could be politics, could be whatever, right? So 5 minutes to have those two conversations. I'll change my countdown clock up there in a moment. Is everybody clear? Okay, away you go. And that is time. Now, I suspect you could use more time, but that's not what we're testing, right? So we're going to keep moving so we can, again, so the assumption we're testing is like, okay, so we generate ideas and kind of move between these different tables. Let's see what happens here. So, and actually, just as a quick test question, just raise your hand, and this is more from a design perspective. Did you manage to actually talk about both questions? Just raise your hands if not. Okay, so some yes, some no. Right, so if you're doing this in the future, keep that in mind. Right? An hour and a half is not probably enough time for that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going into brainstorming. So now we're going to actually brainstorm that how might we question or the what are question, so that bold question at the bottom of your tent card. And we're going to use, again, and this is, I'm just doing this for efficiency's sake. I've been at World Cafes where literally you're writing on the tablecloth, right? They're all big paper tablecloths, which is a wonderful way to do it. But it's probably requires a little bit more time and whatnot. So we're going to do this as what I would like to call kind of just a structured brainstorming or brainwriting activity. So everybody grab some Post-it notes, right? So you've got lots on your table. Grab what you need. Use a Sharpie, just makes it easier to read for the other people. And I'm going to ask you to put one idea per Post-it note. So you're going to brainstorm answers to the questions. So for this is Group C. How might municipalities effectively anticipate and understand the risks and opportunities of disruptive innovation? I'm going to take 1 minute and I'm going to brainstorm possible solutions to that. One idea per Post-it note. Everybody good? All right, so away you go. 1 minute, I'll probably add a little bit of time to that. Okay, that's probably enough. I see people are still writing, so that's great. And again, I'll say this again. So I could give you more time, and I'm just kind of conscious again, so what are we testing here? And we're actually not testing this initial brainstorm. We're testing the next two in a sense, and it'll probably make more sense in a moment. So what I'd like you to do next is I'm going to give you 10 minutes for this. Actually, no, I'm going to give you 8 minutes for this. I want you to share your ideas. So you've got that work mat. That was as big as we could make them. And you'll see somewhere on there it'll say round 1, and it'll be very tight. So if you go over onto the tablecloth or into the other areas, it doesn't really matter. I want you to share all the ideas. So ideally, share them one at a time. As you're sharing, there's going to be redundancies. So just kind of stack them on top. Don't throw them away because it kind of gives us a little bit of an idea of where there's strength behind certain ideas. But you might want to cluster them. So you might end up coming up with some clusters. Individual Post-it notes are great. We're not going to do any kind of prioritizing. We're not going to do any rating of ideas at all during this exercise. So all we're doing is sharing them out, making sure you're clear on what all the ideas are, clustering them, and discuss as you're sharing, obviously. All right? So we're going to give you 8 minutes for that. All right? So 8 minutes to share, cluster, and discuss. Okay. So whether you've shared all your Post-it notes out or not, and again, just for future reference, has any team not shared all their Post-it notes yet? Okay, so that was enough time? Okay. All right, so we're going to keep on moving in pursuit of the greater good. What we're going to do now is we're going to go off my usual script. My usual script actually would be more time on context and more time working through this challenge as a team. But we're actually going to leave this one and go to a completely different question now, right? And that's usually not how I work. So this is where it feels a little risky to me. I don't know and again, honestly, I don't know what will happen here exactly. So again, I'll walk you through the process here. So first thing is, want you to take 3 minutes to help your host summarize what happened at your table in round 1 so they can share it then with the next team that's coming. So in other words, table A here, who's the host here? All right. Carl, sorry. So Carl is going to stay here, and you're going to get table C in the back there. They're going to come and visit you. So your teammates are going to help you figure out, okay, Carl, you're going to have like 3 minutes to prep them. What should you tell them? All right, so just to bring them up to speed on the question. So I just want you to take at each table, have a discussion so you're helping your host get ready to share with the next team what's most important about the discussion we just had. Everybody clear on that? Okay, so take 3 minutes and do that. And we are going. So if you're a host and you feel ready, just raise your hand. Awesome. No. There we go. So, hey, folks. So the visiting group, so some hosts may feel a little nervous about this. Again, your role's not to facilitate. You just, hey, here's the discussion that we had. So be kind to them, just like you've been kind to me. To the host if you're going to a new group. So here's what's going to happen. So leave your Sharpies and your Post-its behind. That'd probably be the easiest. You can take your personal stuff with you or not. You're going to end up back at your table by 2:15, so within like a half hour, 40 minutes. And the hosts are going to stay. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, so we're very clear. Group A is going to table B. Table B is going to table C, and table C, which in most cases is the back, is going to move up and take the place of group A. Hosts are going to stay put. You guys are a little bit different than that, right? So you guys are going to go there, you're going to go there, and this table over here is going to come here. All right, so do the movement, and then I'll give you some instruction. Okay, so if you haven't already started this, 3 minutes, we'll say 2.5 minutes now, is to read the new innovation challenge. And then for the host to share, hey, this is what we were talking about. Here's what I think you need to know. And then we're going to go into a brainstorm. So in about 2.5 minutes, we're going to actually brainstorm on this new question. We're not going to do any more context setting for this question. Fair enough? So just have the discussion. What do we need to know about this question? What did the previous group discuss? Okay. All right. So now we're going to do the next phase of brainstorming. So with the new question, so once again, I want you to grab Post-it notes, blank Post-it notes. I want you to grab a Sharpie. I'm going to give you a minute And I'm going to ask you to brainstorm ideas for the new question, for the table that you're at currently. And I might give you a little bit more time than a minute, but not much more than that. Is everybody clear? All right, so away we go. Okay. So I'm going to go a little bit off script here, so which is the nature of a test, right? So what I was going to ask you to do is kind of go to the next pie shape, the round 2 pie on your canvas on the table, and put all those Post-its down there. I think what might be interesting, and the hosts can help with this, is start sharing your ideas, but keep the previous round in mind as you're sharing them. So in other words, if I come up with an idea and Carl, you might say, oh, we had that in the previous round, so let's put it there. But if there's new ideas, then ideally we'll put those into round 2 section, right? So we're kind of curious about, did the conversation you had in the first round, is that informing your brainstorming in this round? And as a consequence, our ideas that the other group came up with in the first round, are new ideas coming up from that, all right? So it's kind of a stimulus response sort of thing, and this is really what we're testing. So as you're sharing the ideas, try to match them to the existing ideas from the first round. If they don't match, put the new ones in round 2, in the round 2 pie-shaped chart, okay? Away we go. Okay, all right. And we're going to call that a wrap on round 2 brainstorming. Again, I realize you may not have had an opportunity to share everything. I'm tempted to ask a question. So, did any new ideas come up? But I'm not going to. Right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over the summarizing piece. So I'm going to ask the hosts to stretch a little bit more and just say, okay, so I'm going to share basically the same, I'm going to share with the next group. All right, so once again, you're going to move to the next table in the round. Move to the table you haven't been to yet. Okay, so you're at the last table, so this will be the final round before you go back to your original table. So once again, if the host will take 2 or 3 minutes to share the question and what they think the new team needs to know, what was most important about the previous 2 conversations, that would be great. So away we go. Okay, that's time for sharing. And now, again, 1 minute brainstorm on the new question. Do the brainstorm, and then share, cluster, and then I'll give you some instructions just to wrap up the whole event. So away you go. Individual brainstorm on your new question. Okay, that'll be enough time for the individual brainstorm, and it's the same drill again. So share, cluster, and discuss. And just want to remind you again, as you're sharing, if the host can help facilitate the process, oh, that's a new idea that we haven't captured previously, and move that into the round 3. And I'm just going to look at my watch here. I'm going to give you about like 5 minutes for this, and then we'll move back to your original tables. So 5 minutes, share, cluster, and discuss. All right. I'd like everybody to move back to your original tables. Back to your original tables. Hey guys, I'm going to give you some time to catch up with your host with what happened at your table. Before we go there, I just want to position it a little bit. And as I was preparing for this session, I was reminded of a story about Thomas Edison. And Thomas Edison, interesting guy, and he had what he called the Idea Factory, really the first R&D lab in New Jersey in the late 1800s, essentially. And it wasn't just Thomas Edison. It wasn't even Thomas Edison in a small team. It was a real R&D laboratory, so literally hundreds of people working there. One of the things that Edison did routinely was he would have multiple projects working at the same time. So he might be working on light bulb over here, and he might be working on a phonograph over here, and a movie camera over here. And there was a period in his life where he was really interested in concrete and building concrete furniture, believe it or not. And so he might be working on that over there, so concrete material science. And what his practice was that if he got stuck on the light bulb, he'd go, okay, I'm going to move over and maybe I'll work on the phonograph for a while. And I'm going to move over to the movie projector. Oh, you know, that idea that we had back at the light bulb, that actually applies here. And it probably not only applies here, it applies there as well. So that's kind of what we're testing today is, as we go from question to question, do the ideas migrate? Does the one inform the other and leads us to new ideas, wider range of ideas, and maybe more useful ideas in the end, as opposed to the kind of the low-hanging fruit? So that's really what we were testing today. It's a bunch of things we could talk about the process and whatnot, but literally we have like 10 minutes. So what I'd like you to do is, and I think you're probably already doing this, is have the host summarize your experience for the group. What did you observe during the process? And team, summarize your experience for the host. What did you observe during the process? And the natural thing would be to go from that kind of, oh, this is what happened, to so what? What can we take from this? All right? So, and at the end of that kind of conversation, I'll ask for any insights that may be sprung from this. We'll throw the mic around. It's like the talkable or the tossable microphone. And then we'll do a wrap on it. All right? Before we go there, though, because I will forget to do this, I want everybody give us one more hand to thank the hosts, right? Because they were really integral to this process, to making it work. So again, take 3 minutes. Hosts, share what happened with you, what you observed. Teams, share what you observed, either as individual or as teams. And then we'll pull some responses from that. Okay. All right. Check. Steve, thanks. All right, so some of you, I think I brought this out at MIC in Burlington last week. This is Mike the mic. And the idea, Carl, can I throw Mike to you? Okay, so how Mike works is it's got a little lavalier microphone in there. It does not, don't do this, kind of be gentle with it. So remind me your name. Angela, I'm going to throw it to Angela, and then you're going to toss an underhand to Carl. Just do a little practice here, right? Once again, a test. Here we go. There we go.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Throw it to Carl, so
Who's
trying to be gentle with it. Yeah, there we go. Beautiful. That's good. That was perfect. Okay, so we're just going to see if there's any insights anybody wants to share. Thanks, Carl.
I think the process was good in facilitating conversations, like that all happened. It gets progressively more difficult because as you go from the next round to the next round, there's a lot more things that you need to share and discuss before you can get to your ideation process. And it can be a bit intimidating for the third group that comes in after listening to all that. Well, what's left? So almost. Yeah. And maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's more like, do you want to build on other ideas or whatever? So that was just my observation.
Yeah, great piece of feedback, which I totally, when you shared that with me, I went like, oh, you're absolutely, of course that would make sense, right? Whereas I was giving you less time, actually. Yeah. Okay, anybody else want to add anything? Okay, so we have a hand up in the back there, Carl.
Thank you. So similar to Carl's point, got progressively harder as we went along, but it was nice to see the kind of the validation that we weren't completely off base. But just kind of a process feedback. I feel if we took our colors with us to the different stations, it would have been easier to see how we build on someone else or they build on our ideas. It kind of gets a little blurred. So just a simple change, I think, could make it a lot more effective.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Aspen at the same time. It's like exactly the same thing. That would just a simple little tweak that would make it more interesting for everybody, actually. Yeah, okay, great. Anybody want to add anything?
Someone way over there.
Well, let's go to Dana right there.
So we had the same observation, really liked the building on them, but when we got back to our table, we found we were still emotionally attached to our first question, and we wanted to close the circle with another brainstorm at our table.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and that actually was the intention. Let's do, because again, we're trying to carry ideas through, right? So you come back and go, oh, I have another idea here. Yeah. So great piece of feedback there. Thank you. Yeah. Anything else?
Can I jump in? I think this format's really great for stimulating discussion, but I do think if we want to create kind of tangible artifacts that trigger us to keep talking through the rest of the conference, we need to give the hosts more power, time, or skill to synthesize. Yeah. And that's one of these challenges of a big room like this, because that takes time. But I do think, if we each took one idea from these tables, put it on a big Post-it note or something, and had that up during the rest of the conference, the conference will be richer.
Yeah. And to Karen?
Just 2 quick points. We do lots of World Cafes at City Mississauga, and it is a great tool, and thank you for doing that. 2 quick things that we do a little differently is we cross-pollinate, and there's a lot of power in doing that so that different people, it's not the same group staying for the whole time, so one of the purposes of it is to cross-pollinate, so you might have a couple people going to a different table, so you have a few different people at your table. Yeah. And the other thing is we have a takeaway placemat, so everybody has a placemat where they're keeping their own notes. They might jot down ideas, and that's kind of their take-home piece, and they take that back with them to wherever they go, and so that they have that reminder, and some of the ideas that they've written down actually come with them.
Yeah, and Karen, just a question in terms of the amount of time so given kind of the 3 questions we had today and kind of the context, how much time would you say would be ideal for, and maybe not the ideal wave a magic wand kind of ideal, but how much time do you need?
Yeah, so you're right, the time was a little tight for a World Cafe to have 3 rounds. Yeah. And so I would not spend as much time at the table host explaining things. It's, just in 30 seconds or less, give us a quick highlight of what did you take most from the conversation of the other group, or what was the key theme that emerged, or something like that. But you're right, the time was a little tight to have a really great World Cafe.
Yeah, so just creating a little bit more space there. And the gentleman, sorry, what your name is? Chris. As a close, first of all, I want to thank Suzanne. I want to thank Stuart and the other folks from, is that Jenny? Hi, Jenny. Jenny, the other folks from the Guelph team for inviting us back, and frankly for trusting Rick to do something on the stage, right? So thank you very much for that. I'm going to springboard off what Chris says. So I think it would be interesting, and I'm not selling myself on this, or saying I want to do this, because I actually probably don't. But I think it would be interesting at an MIC conference for you to actually do a bona fide World Cafe / unconference open space conference. And the challenge always is that we got great speakers. Like, we have great stuff that we can cover, and I think the other challenge is just opening it up, right? Is trusting that an open space or an unconference is going to feel effective for folks. But the virtues of doing that is people come with their own questions. They find other like-minded people who want to discuss those questions, and because let's say Chris came in with a question, because Chris comes in with that question, the accountability factor and the carrying it forward factor are really kind of done for you, right? So it's very much kind of a free range sort of thing. So it feels a little risky, But I think there's lots of proof that it's worthwhile doing. But then you've got to say, yeah, we're gonna spend at least a half a day, if not a full day, kind of letting this thing run its course. Like kind of have that kind of free range. It's in Calgary next year? Free range, open space. All right, so anyways, there's my plug. There's my plug for trying something different and taking the risk. And the risk will be very small because you're going to have good conversations. Good stuff's going to come from that. So, again, thank you to Guelph folks. Thank you to all of you for giving me space up here. Hopefully it was useful, and have a great rest of the conference. Thanks very much.